You're facing one of the biggest challenges that homeowners face when thinking about moving, and that is, where do I start? Do I buy first or do I sell first? Our hope here is to work through some of the things that you should be considering, as well as give you a framework for how to work through that challenge based on the market, but most importantly, based on your context and how you make decisions.
Absolutely, Dylan. The thing that comes into mind when we talk through this together before filming this video is that there really are three main areas that every home buyer needs to consider when they're going to make that decision about what to do first. And that comes down to first of all, risk tolerance. Secondly, what's the nature of the house types that they're buying and selling, and third, what's the market climate. So these things we're not always going to have perfect answers on, but when you break it down into a way that's easier for us to understand, then it helps to make that decision a lot more clear for everybody. So let's get right into that. As we talked about, the first thing that we think is really important to identify is, really be honest with yourself about your risk tolerance. So risk tolerance is your, willingness or your comfort level with more uncertainty in life. And in this case, we're talking about, your home purchase or the financing that goes along with it, for example. So in the case where you are the kind of person that is, more risk averse. So that means you don't love the idea of more risk, or you really value predictability and certainty. Then you're probably the kind of person that should lean towards selling your property first before you go out and buy. So in the circumstance where, maybe you're moving up to a bigger home, and your family is growing, or maybe you're reaching or stretching the limits of your mortgage approval, moving into a new market where it may be more costly. In those situations, it does make a lot more sense for you to consider selling first, so that you will have that certainty and that firm understanding of where your numbers lie and your foundation lies before you move into that next step of actually buying the home. Uh, Conversely, of course, let's say that you're in a circumstance where, those things are less important and you're actually more risk tolerant. So you're open to different levels of risk as long as it makes sense for you. And in this case, maybe flexibility is more important to you than the certainty. So in this case, probably buy first. If maybe you're not really concerned about the mortgage approval being a stretch, you have some wiggle room in your budget, or that that specific part of the transaction is just less important than it might have been in a different situation. So if that's you, then buying first makes more sense. Also, maybe you're the kind of person that has a particular taste. Like maybe your property that you're looking for is more unique or more difficult to find. In cases like that, it makes a lot more sense to spend that time to buy first. So when you value flexibility or you have specific desires on that, buy first. Otherwise, in other circumstances, the risk tolerance says it makes more sense to look at selling first. But these aren't the only things we want to consider. Obviously, there are other big parts of this. And Dylan, why don't you walk us through what else is really important here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the risk tolerance and flexibility that in yourself is sort of the anchor, and then these other points just kind of tip the scales one way or another a little bit. So when it comes down to the type of house, we're talking about once you've identified the type of house that you're interested in, as well as the current home that you're living in, and so. Out of the two, which one is has a larger buyer pool right now. So if you have a very unique home that isn't going to have a lot of buyers who might potentially be interested in it, given the current market, then it might be more important to sell first, or a better option for you to sell first. Conversely, if you have something that's a home that's very appeals to the masses, then buying first might be better. And then also keeping in mind, as David mentioned, that home that you're looking for, how does it compare? Is it more or less desirable? Because or in terms of the market. So if you're going to be competing with a bunch of people, or if it's a very specific home that doesn't come around all the time, then you might think about buying first. Whereas um, the opposite is true if the home that you're looking for um, is more popular. And then in terms of the market, ultimately it can get a little bit shaky here in terms of it can feel you can get to the point where you're just rolling the dice and gambling a little bit. But looking to see the market and sort of the rate climate, if house prices are seeming to be trending up, then you might be in a better position to buy first, because then you can sell at a future date for a higher price. And conversely, if prices are going down, then you can lock in that high price and sell later, at or buy later rather at a lower price. But of course, nobody has a crystal ball, so hedge that, and that's definitely the least large um, indicating factor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the truth is that, yeah, as we said, I mean, your comfort level as a buyer or a seller is obviously the most important. And while we can't predict the future, all those things do play a part. So, if this chart of this way of looking at it is helpful, then we think that that's great. So, the point is that it all comes down to what fits in your circumstance. We don't obviously know 100% what the future will hold for any one particular transaction that could be very different, even months apart or even weeks apart. So if you want to get more help with this kind of thing, please connect with either of us. We're happy to share and elaborate more on the thinking behind it. Hopefully, we found it useful. But for buyers and sellers out there who are thinking about what do I do first, this is just a great sort of quick guide to help you understand how we think you should make that decision, and how we think you should consider the things that are most impactful to your overall situation. So with that in mind, hopefully it was helpful. Thanks very much.